Okay.
That's weird. That's all I'll say is like it's
Testing.
weird that like the moment that you try
Silence. Why is my edit destinations? No,
Right.
yeah. Okay. There we go. I'm testing all these out.
Yeah.
We had a commanding audience of 8 people, and you made us like take us off this because you couldn't get everything figured out. It's wildly inappropriate. Hey, whatever links you want to look at, send them to me.
Okay.
I'm sorry, did I stutter?
I didn't realize we were doing all 3 of my subjects. So let me.
I gave you a directive, and that's the end of it.
True.
And that is the end of it.
That is true.
I also have I saw there was like a breakdown of the Wagner coup by Dylan Burns, who is somebody we both know and trust. So that might be something to look at as well.
Dylan's great. Hello again.
Hi, sorry, Brian. Thanks for coming back, even though Stacks messed everything up per usual.
What did you send me in the chat? Was this YouTube link? Oh, is this the Dylan Burns thing?
Yes. Okay. So that's like one thing that we could potentially do. I just need the links because I'll be doing the screen share. Hi, Chatula from Prague.
I know what I'll bring up.
Cool, but you gotta send me the links.
Yeah, I'm looking.
I understand that.
I'll kill you.
Is Russia going to pull out of Ukraine? Man, you would think that they would be highly incentivized to do it at this point, given all the internal strife. But I wouldn't be surprised if Vladimir Putin doubles down because he is a profoundly sensitive, I should say. Very thin-skinned.
Okay.
Yeah. So what you do is you just copy the link and then you paste. Yeah. There you go.
I got it. Got it. Just give me a sec. Let me cook.
Let you cook.
You never are you not with the times? You don't know what that means?
But here's the thing. Sherbs told me that you were really not that good of a cook.
Sherbs is my girlfriend, just for everyone's awareness.
Yeah.
Josiah has this hard problem where he talks to me like
Sherbs is his better half. We've referenced this already. Like people are our commanding audience.
Might be new.
No, everybody knows exactly what we're talking about. They're up to date on the lore.
Also, Sherbs is not her name.
Sherbs is the person that, for some reason, I don't know if it was Make-A-Wish Foundation or whatever, just agreed to like interact with Staxiums.
I don't understand.
Exclusive. I know. I'm still trying to figure it out.
It's confusing every time.
Jordan is still trying to figure it out too. He's like, man, Hunter and or Staxiums and Sherbs are really cool, but I don't know. I don't know what it is because he's not that charming at all. I'm like, exactly.
I don't get it either. Yeah, 100%. No. So, hold on. So, Josiah told me that I got to find all these links. So, give me 1 second.
Yeah, you keep doing it. That's fine because we're not even at 1 o'clock yet.
That's true. Yeah, we got some time.
People know we're wildly unprofessional, so they're used to this. You know what I'm saying? While he's doing that, I will also point out, okay, because this probably needs to be addressed for the benefit of everybody.
Mm-hmm.
So, a comment was left on the last video that we did, where I think there was a miscommunication. There was either I completely understand where this comment came from. Completely understand where a person who watches the show and who likes both Stacks and I, there was either a miscommunication or a misunderstanding or both about the nature of mine and Stacks's relationship, our friendship. Okay, because it's one of verbal abuse. All right, that is our love language. That is actually my love language with most of my friends. I love teasing. Okay. I love to be teased. I love to tease others. It's great. The verbal banter. It's all I care about. Right. So
here, can I stick up for you for half a second?
Yes. Go ahead.
So here's what happened. We saw
read the statement that I sent you that I want you to read verbatim. I'm messing with you.
Oh.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay. No, yeah. So we got a comment that was like, oh, dude, Josiah, I have so much respect for you, and I can't believe that you would bring this guest on just for you to harass him this whole time. Mm-hmm. And Josiah messages me. He texts me, and he goes, hey, I'm so sorry. I've never considered that you might not like the banter. And I go, shut the fuck up, dude. What the hell are you talking about? We're fine. We've always been fine. Stop listening to random weirdos on the goddamn internet about our relationship. No, we've always been good, and we banter all the time, and I've bantered back tons of times. but last week we were doing a bit where I was like, well, we were doing this bit where I didn't vote for Hillary Clinton. It was a really funny bit and it was hilarious. And I had to just accept all of the ridicule that was going to come my way because I deserved it.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah,
and we don't kink shame around here. Okay, you have a humiliation kink, and listen, I'm happy to indulge, and nobody here's going to judge you for it. Mm-hmm. But the bottom line is, in all seriousness, I completely appreciate where that comment was coming from, because if you don't have the history and if you have a well-adjusted friendship, you're probably not used to seeing things like that. But our friendships are not well-adjusted; they're animated by verbal banter, and that's just what we do. So,
okay.
All right, I got your submersible link. I've got your Joe Rogan link.
Yeah, let's do the Joe Rogan first.
Rogan,
and then talk about it. Yeah.
Let me make a caption for it though. Ooh, so what do we want? The Joe Rogan says
we come prepared, guys.
Yes, we really are. Joe Rogan vaccines. And debates.
Yeah.
Oh my, like lions and tigers and bears. Oh my.
Yeah. So this happened probably about a week and a half ago. So we're a little late on this news story, but we wanted to talk about it last week, but didn't really have the time for it.
Was it really that long ago? Seriously?
Yeah.
No shot.
Yeah, 8 days ago.
Oh, okay. All right.
Wait, 8 days ago is when this I don't know exactly when this happened, but basically. So I'm going to tell this story, and it's going to sound like I'm taking the conservative side for probably 80% of this story, and then at the end I will show them to be the tricksters that they are constantly. So essentially, Joe Rogan offered $100,000 to this leading immunologist to debate Robert F. Kennedy Jr., right? And do you know anything about this, by the way, Josiah?
I do. So my understanding is that, okay, number one, RFK Jr. is running against President Biden along with Marianne Williamson in the Democratic primary. Yeah. And
I mean, good luck in a very sarcastic way.
Right. Yeah. Well, as a Jill Stein supporter, you need to clarify that you're being sarcastic. You're being facetious.
Yes.
And then my understanding as well is that this Dr. Hotez is some sort of like vaccine expert. Is he like a virologist or like a reputable scientist?
Yes, he is a reputable scientist. I'm not exactly sure his qualifications, but he's for sure. I think he's an immunologist. Yeah, he helped develop the COVID vaccine.
All right. So yes, go ahead.
Yeah, he was basically making fun of Robert F. Kennedy Jr., RFK, on Twitter, basically saying like, "Oh my God, look at this fucking like, why are you spreading this vaccine?" Being very vaguely polite with it. But Joe Rogan responds and says, "Hey, get me on this platform, or I'll bring you on this platform and I'll pay you $100,000 to do it." And then every single conservative pundit out there joined in on this little bit. Andrew Tate personally offered $500,000. I know that Michael Knowles from Daily Wire offered, I think, an additional.
May I interrupt you for just a second?
Yeah, go ahead.
So shouldn't Andrew Tate be allocating those resources for his defense fund?
You would think.
Get it? Because he has been charged
with human trafficking.
Yeah, you should probably be focusing on that.
Very cool. It's very interesting what kind of personalities this type of ideology attracts. Is it not?
Indeed. So anyway, you were saying Michael Knowles as well.
Yeah, tons of those like conservative pundits. Essentially, the pot got, I think it's at $2 million right now. Is like, hey, we will give this to Peter Hotez. It's not on this news article because this was made a little bit before, but there was a bunch of just like conservative pundits who eventually raked in. It's around like 1.5 million, maybe 2 million. And essentially Peter Hotez is like, no, I'm not going to go do this. I don't think that that's worth debating. I don't think that's fair to ask. And I'm going to disagree a little bit with Peter Hotez. I think that anything that the public largely disagrees on is something that we should have a debate on, not whether or not it's like obviously true or obviously false. There are so many vaccine deniers out there. Yes, it is unquestionable that this vaccine works, but so many sources, so many there's so many people out there who don't believe it that I do think it's best to go on this platform. Okay. So that's where I'm gonna start there, where I'm kind of taking the conservative side. Not to take the conservative side, a bunch of people showed up at Peter Hotez's house and just started harassing him. That's not good. To be to be fair, again, I'm gonna constantly switch in between like whose side I'm gonna take before I land. I'm landing on the liberal side, by the way. At the very end of it, yeah. So to be fair, the conservatives were like, "Hey, don't do that." Okay. Joe Rogan was like, "Hey, don't harass the guy." Okay. But basically, Peter Hotez was like, "Hey, I'm not going to do this debate." And I disagree that just because it's so obviously true, that's not something that we shouldn't have a debate on. So conservatives were pointing to it and see like, hey, see, he didn't have a debate. Look how accurate it is. If they had the truth, they would have no reason to not defend it. Clearly,
yeah.
RFK
To
Jr.
clarify specifically, according to your article,
Yeah.
of all the people to say this stuff, this is the worst part. Elon Musk, of all people, jumped in and said he's afraid of a public debate because he knows he's wrong,
Yeah.
referring to Dr. Hotez.
Yeah.
Now, I'm sure that's been echoed by a zillion other people, which is bad enough.
Yes,
but when the world's second richest man and the owner of Twitter, is saying stupid stuff like this, that's only going to make things much more incendiary.
Yes. So I disagree. However, and here's the biggest however, what Joe Rogan and what it seems like almost everyone is failing to mention, which I think is the biggest part of this story, is that there have been like 10 to 12 different immunologists with doctorates in this specific field, or just doctors in general who are like, hey, you don't even have to give me the money. I'll show up and do the debate. Conveniently fully ignored by every single one of these pundits. There are so many people who are like, hey, I am willing to debate the efficacy of the vaccines. Yes, I'm not Peter Hotez. I didn't work on the actual vaccine, but I have read the studies. I've compiled some of them myself. And all of these people are saying, hey, let me go talk to RFK Jr. I'd be happy to debate about this. Because look, debate is a skill. Okay. And we need to acknowledge that. Being able to like hand wave a lot of like gish galloping and understanding like logic trees and where to stop people in their tracks and not like get derailed and not look like a fool. That is a skill outside of just being very good at vaccine or being an immunologist. It requires a different hone of skills. And if you don't have that, we need to say that that's okay. You don't need to be able to defend every single point in the marketplace of ideas. But the thing is we don't have to, because we have people who are willing to defend this. Dr. Avi, who sort of occupies these areas, is one of those people who said, hey, I would love to come in. I am very well equipped to handle these sort of conversations. I am equipped to handle nonsense and people just throwing random studies that they think refute my sources when they absolutely don't. And like getting to the breadth of the articles like really quickly, or being aware of the breadth of the scientific literature. And Rogan just conveniently ignores all these people. And I think that's the big thing to come out from this is like, if you think this looks bad on Hotez, that's fine, but it doesn't look bad for the scientific community, because there's tons of people who are willing to talk to RFK Jr. But I mean, Joe Rogan at the end of the day just wants to bully someone. It doesn't want to get to the truth. And that's what this shows.
Yeah. So, I followed this just a little bit. I mean, my understanding of it was relatively cursory, for a few reasons, because obviously a lot of content creators are talking about it, so I don't want to diminish its importance. But in terms of like my areas of interest and my areas of expertise, the sort of like debate bro, perennially internet driven discourse, it really is not my wheelhouse. But to your point, you could easily make the argument that this does have real world implications for a few reasons. Number one, just consider the players involved. So Joe Rogan is the biggest podcaster in the world. I'm pretty sure by far, number one. Number two,
I feel very safe saying that.
Yeah, I mean we're catching up with him. I think like we're gaining on him in a real way with our 16 viewers, most of whom are from Prague. Go Prague, by the way. Appreciate that. Check that out. Wait, check. That's Czechoslovakia. Never mind.
Yeah,
so
we're international now, boys.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, 100%. So that's Joe Rogan. That's one player. Then you have Elon Musk, who is cheerleading Joe Rogan in this respect. Again, the world's second richest man. I'm pretty sure he is. I think he's passed President Obama as the most followed Twitter account, which he only had to spend $40 billion on the company to get there. Whatever, mission accomplished. So, you have people who are incredibly influential, incredibly rich, incredibly powerful, and who are part of this pantheon of right-wing dipshit demigods. And they're weaponizing all that clout and reputation against somebody like Dr. Hotez, who is, again, he's a virologist. He's, a vaccine researcher. So there's no question he has infinitely greater expertise and education on the topic than anybody, including Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who is running for president against President Biden in the Democratic primary. And it's also concerning vaccines. There was a time when anti-vax skepticism was confined. I miss these days so fondly. When anti-vaccine skepticism was confined to a relatively vocal but extremely small portion of the hippie left. You had like celebrities like Jenny McCarthy and things like that. And I remember telling, so I have members of my family, unfortunately, including one of my sisters who is a nurse, whom I love dearly. She's anti-vax, and it's completely attributable to her faith in the Republican Party, even though, again, ironically, she's a big Trump supporter, and Trump himself, has gotten the vaccine.
Operation Warp Speed. Yeah, it's so funny that like he put so much effort behind the vaccine and then immediately backed off of it as soon as
he can't take credit for it. And I have no sympathy for him because he helped create the cult, which he helped create both the cult and the conditions that made it impossible for him to take credit for Operation Warp Speed in any really efficacious way. All of which is to say, this is really important. But I also appreciate what you just said too, which is debate is a skill. And we should also point out that within debate, you can also break it down further into like sophistry, right? So this is the classic, squabble, or the classic like conundrum back in like the Socratic era, this idea where, you had sophists who were extremely skilled in terms of persuasion and rhetoric. They weren't strong on the facts, but they didn't need to, because at the end of the day, rhetoric and persuasion won the day, and they were very dangerous. And that's ultimately what you have here. Dr. Hotez, I'm not familiar with him, but again, he's a virologist, and presumably he probably doesn't have the polish and the rhetorical prowess, or is at least not very comfortable in those areas compared to Joe Rogan, Elon Musk, RFK Jr., people like that. So I'll say this. If Dr. Hotez feels that he cannot responsibly deliver the facts in a persuasive way in an extremely hostile environment, which is what the Joe Rogan experience and Twitter would be, he is right to avoid the conversation 100%. That is a shrewd strategic move. I can tell you from personal experience, and I consider myself a reasonably skilled debater. I've been in situations where I've had the facts on my side, but because I was up against an opponent who was either more like just had greater debate prowess or took advantage of my willingness to go down every rabbit hole. Like they came out looking better, even though they were weaker on the facts. It's part of the reason why it's hard to debate conspiracy theorists, right? So I'm sympathetic to where Hotez is coming from, both on a personal level, and also I do think at a certain point, for certain topics, that the time of debate is over and people should just be humiliated into silence. For example, I will not debate a flat earther, and I don't think anybody should debate
for sure,
a flat earther.
Because it's too small of a percentage of people. It's like a 0.1, probably less than 0.1% of the population. The numbers are so tiny that we shouldn't even bother to talk to these people. And I think that's the big thing, is like, we live in a democracy. And that's what I always come back to, is like, we live in a democracy and we have the facts on our sides. And yet I don't know how many vaccine hesitant people there are in America, but I wouldn't be surprised if they're like 30-40%. Maybe that seems high. Maybe I'm completely off on my numbers.
We'll find out. I'll Google it while we're talking. Yeah. Keep going. I'll Google it. You were making a point.
That's kind of interesting too. Yeah. I do think that like if it reaches those points where it's like over probably about like 5%, it's like, okay, we need to actually start engaging with these ideas, because that's enough to sway an election. If this is not being addressed by the left, which it kind of needs to be, and then Like, what are we doing? We can't just always have the facts on our side, because we all know that people aren't running to NPR to get their news anymore. They're running to Tim Pool, they're running to Joe Rogan, they're running to any sort of like these alternative media sizes. They're running to Pondering Politics and Staxiums, which is I will say probably also read NPR. I would say probably don't just get it from us.
I'm an NPR simp. I have no problem admitting that.
Yeah, they're my favorite, which is why I mentioned it. But you can go to BBC, you can go to Reuters, you can go to a ton of different places. But yeah, I think that's my line is, if it's enough to sway an election, then we definitely need to at least address it. And I do think that there's this common myth that gets perpetuated on the internet, and that's that people don't change their minds based off of new ideas. And I think that, like, yes, it is true that for the large part, people get swayed based off of experience, right? Like, generally speaking, it's more likely that you're going to be swayed on trans issues by knowing a trans person and realizing, oh, these people aren't out to get my kids, rather than hearing a good debate online. But speaking as a former conservative, the thing that changed my mind on trans issues was reading a Nathan J. Robinson article on
Ooh,
like the
from
current affairs.
current affairs. Yeah,
Yeah.
I have a book. He just put out a book, and I'm blanking on the name of it, but it's basically it's his book about debates, like his version of Mehdi Hassan's How to Win Every Argument, and he basically breaks down 10 to 12 very common right wing talking points, explores from their perspective. Okay, this is the case that they make,
Yeah.
and then he goes basically here should be the framework for your rebuttal, and he cites his facts and figures. And see, here's the thing. I became very frustrated with Nathan J. Robinson, as an aside, during the 2020 primary season, especially given how much he signal boosted Tara Reade's claims against then candidate Joe Biden, and was basically willing to die on this hill, even as additional investigation and further developments undermined her credibility. So I was really frustrated with him in that respect. But yeah, like, it's interesting because he's an extremely skilled writer,
Yeah, yeah. And I read the article, and it was basically just like, oh, did you know that trans people, when looking down at themselves, they don't see something different than what is actually there? And I go, oh, really? Like, I was so blinded by like conservative ideology that I thought they were legitimately like, how do I like, not like schizophrenic, but like actually I don't know, like seeing something different. Like their mind has been warped. And I think that it took me a long time to like recognize that about myself, that I was seeing an entire like group of people in a completely different way. But like unfortunately, it came down to the fact that I didn't have people around me who were trans who were able to like look at me and say, hey, this is not accurate. You have a completely different idea of who we are in your head. I had to read about that through like kind of a little bit of a debate article. And it's unfortunate that some people are swayed by that and that they can't just look at other people, but we have to meet people where they're at. And if people can be swayed by vaccines through just debating them on the Joe Rogan podcast, I mean, Joe Rogan has like 12 million viewers a week. And I think more people would come to see, the vaccine. I think that this would rake in bigger numbers than the normal audience for Joe Rogan. That's just a positive experience. But like I said, yeah, I agree that it doesn't have to be Dr. Hotez.
Yeah. So again, I think that when it comes to dealing with bad faith interlocutors like Joe Rogan, like Elon Musk, like Michael J. Knowles, like so on and so forth, I think that there has to be, and this is something that I'm working on with, because again, I can tell you from personal experience, like I'm pretty much willing to have a conversation with anybody. Now, I will not performatively commit to a position for the sake of argument. Like I get so frustrated when people play the devil's advocate. I think that that's a really useful tool, but you need to wield it responsibly. And
Sure.
I think that very often public figures and debaters with big audiences, that they're too casual with playing the devil's advocate for sake of argument. So that's part of the reason why, Stacks was on a really good WIC TV panel on Friday, which you should definitely check out, over affirmative action.
Yeah.
It's moral value and it's political efficacy, whether or not it's effective policy. And the thing is, Stacks asked me about it. Wick asked me about it. Like, hey, would you be interested in coming on? And the thing is, I don't know enough about it in principle. Like my stance on affirmative action has always been pretty similar to my stance on reparations, which is that in principle, I support it because I think that there are inequities that government and civilization have a moral obligation to address. I don't think that you should just let the chips fall where they are, especially when these inequities were very often because of government action or inaction. So government has an obligation to tip the scales back 100%. But that's principle. What about policy? How does it work in practice? And I don't know enough about the material to commit to a strong position. So I decline the opportunity. And so again, I think you have to be very shrewd about when, where, and how, and pick your battles. And the problem, I think, is, so to your point about, are debates effective? Yes, I think there's clearly a wide audience. Set aside Joe Rogan or whatever, Ben Shapiro, and even people on the left, like Destiny and Vosh or whatever. There's a reason. Sam Cedar in the Majority Report. There's a reason that these people are so popular, which is that debate, or the aesthetic of debate, is so like there's such an audience for it. But I do think there's some things that debate's just simply not effective at. So conspiracy theories are a great example. I think if there was any, I don't know what the evidence is on this, but I am willing to commit to this position that if there's any evidence on the efficacy of debate against conspiracy theories, I'm willing to bet it's with me. The evidence is with me, which is that debate is extremely ineffective.
Sure.
At debunking conspiracy theories, which is
why. And you would put vaccine hesitancy as a conspiracy theory, I assume.
I think it flirts with it. This is why I'm less committed to, like, on the subject of vaccine hesitancy, because I do think you can easily make the argument that experts have an obligation to really put forth a last, like, really solid effort to disabuse as many people as possible. But, like, as a general rule, I think conspiracy theories should just be mocked and belittled into silence. I think conspiracy theorists should be bullied 100%. I don't think they should be debated. I think they should be bullied into silence, because I don't know if I agree with you. That's cool. I know, but I'll ask you for a debate where a conspiracy theorist is conceded, and you'll never find one. They don't. No,
of course. But wait, hold on. I'm not doing it to change the conspiracy theorists' minds, though. I'm doing it for the audience.
Audience for who? What audience?
Oh, like you're just saying, like, some random person? Conspiracy. Oh, no. But yes, there are tons of conspiracy theorists who will watch the Joe Rogan podcast who will say, I'm not going to be convinced by this guy. RFK Jr. is still my guy. Okay, thank you for fighting science. However, there's going to be a decent amount of people, like, I don't have specific names in mind, but people who I know very close who are just unsure about the whole thing, who I can point to and be like, hey, seems like you're a little not sure whether or not these vaccines work. Maybe you could watch this and it can bring to light, like, these two separate issues. And if they do a really good job of, like, rebutting all of the RFK Jr.'s points, you could be like, hey, look, see, this is an example of the ludicrous things that the conspiracy theorists will say, people like your friends are saying, and maybe you should listen a little bit more to the experts. That's all I'm saying, is it's going to be at least a little bit of a tool, and I certainly don't think it's going to hurt our position.
Well, yes and no. So let's clarify. If you're saying should virologists and experts who have at least some sort of rhetorical polish, should they do almost like a preemptive debunking video about the efficacy of vaccines? Yes, I think there's utility in that, because there are people who are not conspiracy theorists, but are on the fence, they're not, like, in full-blown conspiracy theories that the COVID vaccine is just Pfizer's attempt to chip us, or whatever. But there are people who are genuinely ignorant, and I don't mean ignorant as in stupid. I mean, they just don't know. And that some sort of, like, public service announcement from an effective communicator who has the facts on their side, that would be very effective, especially if they were doing, like, a Q&A style approach. Yeah. But that, to me, is different from debating a conspiracy theorist. I don't know how much utility is there when you're talking to a conspiracy. Like, there's a reason one of the biggest debate bros of all time, Sam Harris, will not debate conspiracy theorists on the vaccine. And this guy will talk about anything with anybody at any time. But he drew a line in the sand about a year and a half ago with one of the other members of the IDW, whose name is actually escaping me at the moment. It's the guy he was a university professor, and he quit the university. It was the Evergreen State.
Peterson?
No, Weinstein, Brett Weinstein.
Oh, sure.
Because he and his wife were really like flirting initially, and then they just openly embraced it, like
With vaccine
COVID
hesitancy.
conspiracism. And Sam Harris made the decision. He's like, listen, again, I've proven over years, I will debate anybody at any time about anything, no matter how controversial or insensitive, but you always lose a debate with a conspiracy theorist. You always lose. And I do believe that. So I think that there's a utility in doing rhetorically effective PSAs and having conversations like with a responsible journalist. Like if Dr. Hotez sat down with somebody like Christian Amanpour or whatever, and she's like, listen, I'm not a conspiracy theorist because conspiracy theorists are stupid and we should laugh at them at all times. But I am going to responsibly pose things that they say, and you address them, you debunk them and crush them with your vastly superior morals and ethics and intelligence. I would be cool with that. I just don't think that you should put an expert and a conspiracy theorist in a room and think that the expert's going to walk away looking good. I don't think it works that way.
I think I just have to disagree. I think
I love you, and I think you're a great debater, but I think any conspiracy theorist would walk all over either one of us.
Well,
on any
okay,
topic.
I don't know about that. I am primed to talk to conspiracy theorists. My brother is like low key like a conspiracy theory, like a little bit of a fascist, and I have legitimately.
Isn't that the brother that you say you try to emulate and you want to be like when you grow up?
Yeah,
Exactly. Is that what you say?
exactly.
Oh, that guy.
That way.
Yeah.
And my cousin is legitimately runs like a conspiracy theory website, and actually,
Is that
I
the one
asked
that
him-
you're an admin for?
Yes,
Is that the
yes, it
Facebook?
is.
Okay, yeah.
No, like I've legitimately asked him sometimes if he thinks like Joe Biden is like a puppet or a clone or something like that. He's like, I can't rule anything out, buddy. And I'm like, dude, you're psycho. And I had I've had tons of conversations with conspiracy theorists, and I do think that there are times where you kind of have to go like, okay, there is nothing that's going to make you change your mind, but at least I got the entire room to see that. Like that you cannot change your mind regardless of what anything is thrown at you. And I do think that that is the only rhetorical strategy that you can come to, not to like debunk them, but to show provably that like you are not looking for the facts. You are looking to just be a thorn in everyone's side. And you are like, because you could just ask any conspiracy theorist point blank, hey, what would make you change your mind on this? And they won't answer the question. They'll find a way to
Or they'll
pivot,
say
and
not, or that like Luke Beasley had a discussion at the Trump arraignment in Miami a couple of weeks ago with several Trump conspiracy theorists, because of course the Venn diagram between a MAGA supporter and a conspiracy theorist, you know what the Venn diagram looks like?
It's a circle.
It's a circle.
Yeah.
It's a circle.
Yeah.
And he asked her, like what, because she was actually espousing much of the same thing. Apparently President Biden passed away a long time ago. The Joe Biden that we see is an actor working on behalf of Donald Trump in this really Machiavellian way to show the world what a Democrat capture of an election would look like. But in reality, Donald Trump is still president, but he's kind of like God. He's allowing bad things to happen to show people what happens when you don't follow him. She said basically everything to that effect.
Yeah.
And Luke very patiently said, okay, well, that was basically what they ended on. What could I give you? What could I give you to persuade you that you were wrong?
Yeah.
And she said nothing. And it was almost like a refreshingly honest answer.
She said nothing, or she said the word
She said
nothing?
Yes, she said the word nothing. She admitted that nothing could persuade her.
Yeah.
So no, I mean, listen, I've had plenty of conversations with conspiracy theorists as well. I grew up in Kentucky. Conservatives in Kentucky, they're conspiracy theorists too. I'm just saying, like, I think there's a reason that the most accomplished debaters, or some of the most accomplished debaters, are very, very, very hesitant to engage with conspiracy theorists. Destiny's the closest one I know who is relatively cavalier about sparring with conspiracy theorists, and even he was like, I'm
not saying be cavalier about it, and I'm saying absolutely be hesitant, and I'm saying Peter Hotez was right to go, hey, actually I need to dip my toes out. I'm not equipped to handle this.
Yeah, but I'm saying even people who do,
but
because I agree with you. Like we're in complete consensus that somebody who is an expert but not a skilled debater is just right to remove themselves from that situation.
All I'm saying is, like, I think the threshold of like 40%. We didn't get a number because you said that you would get a number.
I did, and I
talk
actually can't find like any. The closest thing I found
Sure.
was like Pew Research, and it's like 7 pages long. And I was trying to listen. I was trying to give you my
Sure.
undivided attention
No,
and
it's
be like
okay.
a good friend, but I get punished for it. This is what I'm talking about. You're like, hey, why are you paying attention to me and not like doing research on the side? And I'm like, well, Stacks, you have very
You get
interesting
mad at
things to
me.
say. It, it
I do get
is.
mad at
Yeah,
you when
you
you're
do.
not paying attention to me. So
Exactly. And
it
then
is
when I
fair.
do pay attention to you, you get mad at me. This is when this is why we were never going to work.
Well, I think we can still make it work.
I don't think
Right,
so.
baby?
I don't know. But you were
Anyway,
saying, but
I think here's what I'll say. I think the threshold, there is a threshold, and I think it's met when I'm going to guess 35%, put a huge like I am pulling that number out of fully just like lived experiences and what I've seen on the internet and what I think the people are. I could be so wrong on those numbers. Okay, so don't quote me on that.
quote him.
35%
He
of
said
America. Yeah, true.
35%. He's
Are at
something
least
like that.
hesitant. Okay, not like Pfizer's out to kill us, but like, hey, I don't think these work. Like maybe 35% of America. And yeah, 35% of America plus 11 million listeners. I think that those two metrics alone are enough to be like, okay, let's send our best and our brightest. We have to use this platform to reach as many people as humanly possible, and they better be fucking prepared.
But to
They
be
better
clear,
know.
I know I'm with you. But I want to be clear because maybe we don't disagree. But you're saying, because I agree, I think even Dr. Hotez agreed. Listen, we can have a conversation about vaccine. The only thing that Hotez hesitated on was debating a conspiracy theorist being
Right.
questioned by a host, either who doesn't know or is playing the devil's
But that's
advocate,
the
like
only
Joe
way you're going to
Rogan.
get on Joe
Wait a
Rogan.
minute. But wait a
Okay.
minute.
Okay.
He was for that, and I'm for that. I'm fine with that. I'm fine with an expert sitting down with a host who's like, listen, I,
Sure.
the host, either
But
genuinely don't know or I do know, but I'm going to play the devil's advocate to test you, and you, the expert, can do this in real time.
you're not going to get
That I'm
11
cool
million
with.
views that way.
So you're saying that it needs to be actually
I'm saying we
debating
have
a
to. I'm
conspiracy
saying
theorist.
I agree with you that is better. However, reaching people is the end goal of any policy education or any science education. And if we are using a platform that people just don't find interesting, that is also an issue. We have to meet people where they're at. And I understand that there is a little bit of a threshold that needs to be met before we start engaging in just like whatever everyone wants. But like I always come back to this. Unfortunately, we live in a democracy, and unfortunately, like that is how so many people get their news, and we have to meet them where they're at.
But
To a
how do you know
degree,
it's a net positive? Because again,
I have to have faith that it is.
because I'm thinking of some again, and I look at somebody. The reason Sam Harris is so illustrative to me is because he's willing to talk about some of the dumbest shit with some of the dumbest people, you know, and he's been at various points ankle, knee, waist deep in culture war nonsense that has absolutely no bearing on anybody. This is a
Yeah,
guy who
yeah.
would find fodder in this, and even he's like, I think this would do more harm than good. So, like, that's my question is because I hear you that debating a conspiracy theorist is going to generate more clicks because it's controversial. It's probably going to be more performatively entertaining.
I think.
But wait a minute, let me
Yeah, sorry.
didn't finish. How do you know? How do you know that when you do that and you expand the audience, that because expanding the audience is not in and of itself an inherent good. You can actually signal boost bad ideas and actually spread the bad ideas. How do you know that that's not happening?
Because here's all I'll say. I don't think how we're doing it now works. I think that this has been a disaster for vaccine hesitant, or sorry, for the truth in regards to vaccines is this Peter Hotez debacle. Because so many people, including Elon fucking Musk, and he uses that platform to just anytime he comments, everyone sees it. I don't know if you have been on Twitter. You just see Elon Musk everywhere. And
I blocked him.
yeah, fair.
He's the
Good.
one guy I blocked. The one guy I blocked because
Well, me too.
yeah, I can't. I
This
can't.
this second person. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, you mean I blocked you or you blocked me
No,
and
no, no.
Elon
You
Musk?
blocked me and Elon Musk. Those are
I
those
respond to
are the
you
two people.
all the time. Okay. I give you words of encouragement publicly.
True.
I I say mean things to him on Twitter
He
constantly, like
does.
all the time. I think I think
Um,
every time you say literally anything, I'm like,
Shut the
P.S. You're a
fuck up,
dick.
Stacks. Yeah, that's true.
All right, I'm sorry. Go ahead. Elon
um,
Musk.
I don't like I'm looking at how many people are reading those tweets and how many people watch the RFK Jr. debate where he just went on a ramble. And I don't think the facts will be on our side opinion is doing it anymore because so many people are just completely ignorant of the facts and completely have warped their minds. And I'm going to blame alternative media, legitimately moving away from like mainstream media towards alternative media where they have absolutely no standards might be the biggest problem for the truth. But
So yes, I just want to say you said something about the facts on our side. I want to be very clear about this. Where we are
yeah,
in 100% agreement is, and I like break out into hives when people either say or suggest this, that the facts speak for themselves. Absolutely not.
right,
As
right,
an enthusiastic, progressive, and democratic partisan who is this way because that side is simply better than the alternative, I am infuriated every time a Democratic operative, either a sitting member of the Democratic Party or people who are aligned with them in the media, don't tout the Democratic Party's policy record and the better progressive values, where they're just like, for example, the one that I constantly go back to is when it comes to the economy.
sure.
If you look at poll after poll after poll, the majority of Americans are convinced
That
that
Republicans are
Republicans are
the
better on the
fiscally,
economy.
yeah,
That is absolutely false. Not a
yeah,
little false. That is 100%
strictly false.
categorically
Yeah,
false on every metric. GDP growth, job performance, annual stock performance, all the things. All the things. Democrats are just better. Fiscal responsibility, they contribute less to debt and deficit. And when they do contribute to debt and deficit, it's on better things. So, my frustration is this: people just assume that, okay, they'll get that. No, no, no. You need to be shouting from the rooftops that of the 45 million jobs that have been created since the collapse of the Soviet Union, 42 million were created under Democratic presidents. Why doesn't everybody know that? Miss me with the whole facts speak for themselves. No, you need to be ending every sentence if you're a Democrat, no matter what the question is. Hi, Mr. Democratic operative. How's the weather outside? Well, it's funny you say that. The weather is really nice and sunny. And by the way, 42 out of 45 million jobs that have been created in the past 35 years have been created under Democratic administrations, thus proving that we are fiscally and economically superior by far to the Republican Party. And anyone who disagrees is factually wrong and should cry themselves to sleep. That should be the end to every goddamn sentence. But it's not, because people just assume, facts speak for themselves. They don't. So I completely agree with you. And I
mm,
do agree that in terms of, vaccine, like a pro-vaccine stance, I think some of the issues early on were because, like, as much love to Dr. Anthony Fauci, who again is an expert he was a civil servant of like 40 years. He served under Republican administrations, Democratic administrations, faithfully managing epidemiological crises under Republicans and Democrats. So again, miss me with this whole, he's just this leftist progressive shill, out to ruin Democrats or out to
right,
ruin Republicans. He was appointed by a Republican, President Reagan, but he was not a great debater, right? He was
for
not the
sure.
best effective communicator about all this stuff. The other problem, Stacks, is that lies have an advantage. We talk about, there's this great quote attributed to Mark Twain that, a lie goes around the world twice in the time it takes for the truth to lace up its boots.
Yeah.
So when you're talking about alternative media and Twitter and the arrays stacked against us, there's absolutely no way for the facts to beat lies. In this respect, lies will always have an advantage. And I just don't think at this point, I don't know, on the subject of vaccines and conspiracy theories, I don't know if that gap can be closed.
So well, I guess what I'm saying is like, I'll even agree with you that all of these, because it sounds like what you're saying is we should just ban these places, right? That like, I don't know what your solution is to these 30, 40% of Americans. That gap needs to shrink. And I feel like I can look up what you're describing, which is just, hey, let's debunk the COVID things in a cute little infographic on the Mehdi Hassan show or something like that. I'm sure they've done it.
Great one.
You know, like I feel so positive that they have done these like little, hey, here's what they have said, and here's how that's not true. I just don't think that
You don't
has
think they've
grabbed
debated?
enough people.
You don't think they've debated conspiracy theorists too on COVID vaccines? Like I grant you, those
That's
preemptive
fair.
pre-bunk videos, they're out there,
Well,
no
not
question.
here's what I'll say. Not on a platform like Joe Rogan's. And I think that we need to I think that we need to acknowledge, hey, look, that is the way that we can get the best reach is through Joe Rogan. Like, unfortunately, we're not going to get 12 million viewers all compacted into one tiny little thing for anything. Like if we go through like we could go on NBC and I don't think they rack those type
No,
of
Joe
numbers.
Rogan, I think, consistently outperforms all the major networks in terms of
And I think
viewership.
that like we need to take advantage of that. We need to take advantage of the fact that there are 12 million people who are sitting down and someone is willing to have someone on who is able to debunk these points and to maybe get in a hostile argument, a hostile conversation, as long as they are prepared, as long as we have faith that we bring in the best person who is able to wield those facts, not just have them, but to wield them. And I think that's all I'm advocating for is like
Here's
I'm not saying some podunk just like, hey, let's
yeah.
have a university with like 300 people. That's probably not going to do any interesting good.
Let me bring up this comment and then I'll answer your question.
Yeah.
Because I think this, if I recognize the name, I think this is a guy who comments on a lot of my videos and he doesn't like them. He's like, "Are you Democrats still campaigning for COVID amnesty? LOL." I don't know what you mean by COVID amnesty. Do you know what he's talking about?
I don't either. I actually looked it up a little bit and it looks like it's a
Chris, if you're still
pandemic
here,
amnesty is a thing.
Chris, if
But
you're
I
still
can't
here,
figure out what it is.
clarify when you get a chance. Chris, if you're still here, go ahead and comment again. Well, while you're looking that up, to answer your question, I think the genie. I think there's no getting the toothpaste back in the bottle when it comes to this. So I don't think that there's a really good solution. I think at this point, conspiracy and conspiracism has infected much of the. I think ultimately, I think this comes back down to politics. It really is. So the reason that COVID skepticism is what it is, and we can look at this, red county to blue county, this is a Republican problem. This is a conservative problem. It is.
Yes.
I'm sorry, 100%.
No. 100%. I think we have conspiracy theorists on the left, but they are such a smaller percentage. Absolutely.
Yeah. So I think that, and we'll look at this comment here in a second. So I think what I would have done, what if we had, the time stone and we could go back, I think this further emphasizes why the Republican Party has to be politically neutralized, why they have to be rhetorically neutralized, why they have to be, yes, defeated in elections, defeated in debates, but also mercilessly crushed in the realm of public opinion and not treated as a co-equal party in terms of Republican leadership as like good faith interlocutors. What I want to see, you have to destroy their credibility as much as possible. You have to make it harder for them to win elections as much as possible. You have to press your advantage as much as possible. The reason that we're in this situation is because the Republican Party has been able to maximize their systemic advantages. They've been able to wield power or seize power in, 30 out of 50 state legislatures. You have the Supreme Court. You have at various times the Senate and the House of Representatives, as well as the presidency. And I think if the Republican Party were less relevant, you would have less conspiracism because there would be less of a platform for it. So I think it's a multifaceted approach. You have to kick the hell out of the GOP politically, dominate every election, increase voter turnout, basically make it a popularity contest because they lose popularity contests because they're losers. So make it, cram maximizing voting rights on a federal level, force it down the throats of every red state, whether they like it or not. And then you have to be merciless, I think, in terms of rhetoric and public outreach. No more of this, my friends on the Republican side. No, you need to say Donald Trump's an idiot. Nancy Mace is an idiot. Kevin McCarthy's an idiot. Marjorie Taylor Greene is an idiot. I think there has to be a combination of pre-bunking, debunking, and deep and profound and aggressive public shaming. That's what I think.
I think that's fair. I don't necessarily disagree. I don't.
Yeah.
I mean, and I will say 100%. I agree with all of those measures that you take. I'm just saying we have 12 million people here, and I don't think it's going to do harm. I think it would be good to have someone like that. But we should talk to the comments because
Yeah.
I think
So
we
let's
reached a
go with
pretty good
Alex.
conclusion.
Alex O'Brien first because he was the first. Who would be the one you choose to debate the conspiracy theorists?
Yeah, I mean, so I mentioned that Dr. Avi, who sort of runs around these circles, I know he's a Twitch streamer, and I think he's a general practitioner, has said, "Hey, I'm very well equipped to deal with like vaccines. I didn't work on them directly, however, I know them very closely. I think that would be a perfectly fine person, or have someone who worked on these who is like willing to have like maybe get in some like pre-conversations with a lot of these like debate pros, people like Destiny or something like that. Just like have a conversation, make sure that they know how to handle those sort of like the crazy sort of vitriol that they might spew, or the nonsense that they'll just like point to. How to sort of debunk those in real time is sometimes a really honed skill. So, I mean, that's what I would suggest at the very
I'll
least.
also point out before we address the comments by Gunsmoke too, because he has many good comments here. I'll
Yeah.
also point out, actually, now that I'm thinking about it, Stacks, I don't think the right and people like Joe Rogan are really incentivized for the left to bring their best and brightest.
I agree, but at least we should be shouting that we're willing to bring the best and the brightest.
Yeah,
And now
but
we can
there's
turn
a
it onto the
reason they
Elon
want
Musk thing.
Hotez and not like
Of
like
course,
yeah.
of course. I 100% agree. But at the very least, our rhetoric can't be, hey, we shouldn't debate these guys anyway, but it should be, we're willing to debate them, but they, for some reason, are just focused on targeting some one guy. I think that rhetoric goes a long way.
Okay, fair enough. Now let's turn to Gunsmoke. He's got 4 comments here that are really good, and we're gonna read them all, and then you can respond. I think you guys need to be clear on a few terms here. Your weird uncle who believes in conspiracies is not a conspiracy theorist. People like Ryan Dawson, who's a conspiracy theorist who debates the 9/11 conspiracy for the past 10 years, would absolutely run circles around anyone unfamiliar with the common traps. Therefore, there's a reason why debaters like Destiny or Sam Harris won't debate C theorists. Because they're somewhat smart, their egos are wrapped up in their screwed up worldview. And I think it's right. That's what I'm saying. It's almost like I'm trying to think of like a good metaphor, but when you're talking to a conspiracy theorist, the least capable conspiracy theorist, when you're talking conspiracy theories, has a colossal advantage over the best non-conspiracy theorists. It's just completely uneven terrain. I think you drag any vaguely competent conspiracy theorist, and he would put the fear of God in Sam Harris, Destiny, Vosh, Sam Cedar, whoever, where they would be like, even though on any other topic, they would turn that guy into ground beef.
I don't know if that's the case. I think that one, I mean, you can ask him directly. You're a lot closer to Destiny than I am, but like, I think he's debated conspiracy theories tons of times.
He's debated conspiracy theorists in the past. He arguably does.
And vaccine hesitant people for sure.
And he also does it like when he debates Rob Noor. But if you ask him, I mean, he said like somebody like Rob Noor, like, you know, the Clinton emails, whatever. He's publicly said that he hesitates because that guy's a conspiracy theorist, even though they have, you know, they have like personal history together. You know what I mean? Like it's not like he's a known variable. But
and we've both debated Rob Noor, and it is. Rob Noor, and that is difficult to engage with because he absolutely knows how to steamroll a conversation, and like I think it's hard because I think you generally in your debate had way more facts on your side and you were getting steamrolled, and I was kind of a little bit more hesitant about it, but I at least like I think I had a little bit more of like I know how to stop these steamrolling and make fun of you rather than like, so I think that it really plays to like hone skills and things like that. I guess all I'm saying is,
well, Gunsmoke is ultimately siding with you, by the way. He's like, the problem, Ruminate, is that anti-vax is now a quasi-populist opinions right now. JRE is a huge platform for this conspiracy theory. It definitely needs to be challenged, not by Hotez necessarily, but nonetheless has to be challenged. So
I don't know if I understand the distinction between a conspiracy theorist and someone who believes in conspiracies. And I feel like I looked it up, and the conspiracy theorist definition is just a person who believes that some secret but influential organization is responsible by a particular event or phenomenon. So I'm willing to engage with whatever this distinction it is that you're making, but I don't know if I'm understanding it.
Maybe he's just referring to the type of conspiracy theorist who would be absolutely dangerous to a competent debater in good faith.
It's different from
probably
like
not your weird
uncle,
uncle, but somebody like Ryan Dawson, you know.
It's my cousin, but that's okay. I might have said
I'm sure you have a
uncle.
weird
He's
uncle.
older
I
than
know.
me
Listen, I'm sure you
by a
I'm sure you have a
margin,
weird
so I
uncle.
might have
Don't.
said uncle.
They're not mutually exclusive. Do you not have a weird
True.
uncle?
I've got some weird uncles for
That's
sure.
right. I mean, your weird uncles have a weird nephew. This guy. Oh, this guy.
Nice.
Yeah.
That
This guy.
nice.
Yeah.
Nice, dude.
Yes. Yeah.
Nice. But yeah, I guess I think that's what comes down to. I
That's
definitely
fair.
agree. Yeah.
No, and I think that listen, I think that this is a legitimately I side more with Hotez and Mehdi Hassan and Sam Harris, and I get where you're coming from because I agree with you. I'm sure Destiny would probably be more on your side than mine in this respect, and a lot of
Sure.
others would as well. And obviously chat is so I think there's like a legitimate thing. Ultimately, at the end of the day, I think you have to what's the expression the great Tywin Lannister used in Game of Thrones? When he was talking about preempting a thing, kill it in its crib. And I think that's what you have to do with conspiracy theories. I think the best way to potentially eliminate conspiracy theories is to ruthlessly pre and debunk and all undermine their ability to signal boost.
Yeah.
Where we were set up for failure with the situation with COVID vaccines is you have a profoundly, deeply anti-intellectual political party that commands tens of millions of adherents, thanks to, in large part, their capture of mainstream media, as we talked about. So Fox News, the biggest, most successful mainstream news network, is right-leaning, ideologically so. Their mainstream counterparts are not ideologically driven. They're both side centrists who want to avoid the appearance of bias. So they'll criticize Trump for retaining national defense information, but then they'll talk about how Joe Biden lied in an anecdote about an uncle that he had back in Scranton. Both sides do bad things, stupid shit, which is why I'm so ruthlessly hostile towards that sort of ethic.
Totally.
This is a great example of where
Rightfully
this
so.
creates a problem. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then the closest thing we have to a Fox News counterpart is MSNBC. I would argue they're nowhere near as ideologically driven. They're certainly nowhere near as effective, and they're certainly hamstrung in terms of how far they'll go. We saw from the Dominion lawsuit the ways in which Fox will just gleefully lie. It was about elections, but they'll gleefully lie in order to avoid losing audience members. So you have
and they
that.
got sued over it.
You have the fact that had to pay out $800 million. It was incredible given the high legal threshold for defamation in this country. The fact that they were almost certainly going to lose that case just goes to show you how egregious they were.
Totally.
I think you take that consideration. You also have the bad faith of Republican leadership who are willing to weaponize. They did it with Trump, and they're willing to do it with things like vaccine hesitancy. Do you think for a second that any of these people hesitated to get the vaccine? That's one of the recurring things about Tucker Carlson. He won't publicly say whether or not he got vaccinated, and we're pretty sure he did. He almost certainly got vaccinated.
Yeah, I think that but also I don't think Joe Rogan did.
I'm sorry. Yeah, and he
I think that there's a little bit of a different. I agree with all of the Fox News people. I think that there are some actually out loud conspiracy theorists like RFK Jr., Joe Rogan, who are no, the kind of the proponents of it. Because I think Tucker Carlson was he didn't want to engage with it, but once it was okay, well, this is how to build an audience. He wasn't the person with the he was the person with the loudspeaker, but he was mostly just reflecting what other people were saying. I think the people who are bringing it up actually don't get the vaccine.
Well, not to absolve Joe Rogan of responsibility here, because he's not just this passive actor, but Joe Rogan, I think, was pretty candid when he talks about how he says things like, look, I'm an idiot. I don't think he's an idiot per se, but I think that that's more to the truth than not, in that he's just a very unserious person who doesn't have any scholarship in most areas of relevance, with politics and science and things like that, which makes him susceptible. When you combine that with his just asking questions, centrist philosophy, that makes him fodder for conspiracy theories. And then, of course, given his position as a conduit to other conspiracy theories, makes him uniquely dangerous. It's funny. That's why I don't hate Joe Rogan at all. I really don't, because I think it's as silly as it sounds, this multimillionaire is in many ways himself a victim of more nefarious actors like Tucker Carlson and others as well, with that sort of mentality. So
I think I largely agree. I mean, obviously, we would both agree that he is deeply, deeply, deeply irresponsible.
Yes.
But I think that is his issue, is irresponsibility. I don't
Yeah.
think that he is a necessarily bad actor. I think
No, I don't think he's nefarious. No, I don't think he's nefarious. I think
yeah,
is he bad
his
faith?
maybe
Maybe.
his
Yeah.
perspective. I think his perspective is like, I just want to have everyone who the mainstream isn't covering for
Right.
whatever reason,
As though
and
that's inherently
largely,
valuable, which again is another
yes,
thing. Like,
it's
it
not.
just drives
Yes,
me nuts. Like,
no, totally.
everyone's turning
He's a
right, so I'm going
fool
to
and
turn left.
irresponsible.
Oh,
Yes,
yeah.
totally. But like sometimes that brings out people like, I mean, he had Bernie Sanders and I think Warren and a lot of like some
He's
like
interviewed David Pacman
liberal,
multiple
yeah,
times as
Pac-Man
well.
for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, tons of people in this space. Not like it's very one-sided, but that's mostly because people on the right, for some weird reason, keep being driven out of these spaces, and it's not because there's like this left-wing bias. It's because they are deeply liars who constantly cannot be honest with their audience. So, I think Joe Rogan attracts just anyone who has been sort of like left out
Yeah.
from mainstream media, and that tilts him really heavily in the right's favor.
Yeah, and he's human like anybody else. So I'm sure, especially if you're inundated with online this is yet another reason why I try my hardest to have perspective about how Twitter is not the real world, because I
Yeah,
imagine I'm trying to like put myself in Joe Rogan's shoes. Man, I'd love that bank account. Would love that bank account, number one. Number
totally.
two, if I felt that listen, I'm just a dude, I get along with everybody, and on so many values, I consider myself left leaning. And I think that that's true. I think that, I think that Joe Rogan said, and I believe that in 2016, he was a Bernie guy. And I think he even said
Yeah.
that when he interviewed Bernie in 2020, he was like, I was and still remain a huge fan of yours, blah, 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 whatever. And if I'm being inundated with faceless people on Twitter calling for me to like lose everything, because of this conversation or that might just like subconsciously drive me further to the right and make me more, receptive to their propaganda. So that's the other thing too. Like that's where like quote unquote calls for cancellation, which is a tool that both sides use. This idea that it's a left-wing
Totally.
construct is obviously really stupid. And if you believe
Yeah.
it, you're a liar.
100%.
But
Like we all were here in the early 2000s. Okay, shut the hell
right.
up. We saw what happened with the chicks or the Dixie Chicks at the
With Bill
at the
Maher.
time.
Bill Maher cracks me up because when he
Yeah.
talks about cancel culture now, he's like so sympathetic to the right. And I'm like, dude, your first show, Politically Incorrect, was
Yeah.
canceled by conservatives because they thought you were being too harsh to the Bush era military, you idiot. But anyway, I digress. My point
Yeah.
is, I see how all of this kind of feeds together. And that's why I agree that you don't not engage with Rogan. You don't not engage with people on the right. Like, that's why I love the fact that, Destiny has conversations with right wingers, and Mehdi Hassan did that great interview with Matt Taibbi about the Twitter files. That's great because there's this perception, unfortunately, that the left doesn't like to debate. I'm just saying, on the subject of conspiracy theories, I guess I'm like, oh, I mean, I see it, but I don't. And so maybe you'll persuade me in a day or two.
Sure. Fair
So,
enough. And I want to, and here's where we will definitely agree, just really quickly, just to bridge something. Like if Wick, for example, was like, hey, we're doing something on conspiracy theories, I would decline because that would be streamed to 100 people. Okay. And I think that is so much less of an, like, it does not hit that threshold of like 12 million people. And
so
all debate conservatives, but like, Lactoid is not a conspiracy theorist. He's just kind of a numbskull. I love the guy.
So Alex O'Brien said, did you ever watch how Jesse Lee Peterson dominates a guest that he interviews with circular absurdities, infuriating and frustrating? He renders his guest speechless, can't debate with crazy. And that is precisely why Jesse Lee Peterson's a great example.
No, but you disagree with this example.
No, I don't.
Let me say this.
Go ahead.
Absolutely, he drives some of his guests crazy, but people who are able to like navigate that and sort of duck and weave and be like, bro, what the hell are you talking about?
This is
Jesse Lee Peterson look like an insane.
Wait a minute, but this is, God, I'm such a 4D chess master. I am Emperor Palpatine because I knew you were going to say that. And now I've got a pre-bunk for you.
Go ahead.
Which is, the thing is, they don't engage with Jesse. What do they do to Jesse Lee Peterson? They make fun of him.
Totally.
Stats, if you want to make fun,
that's part of the art.
It's not part of it. Listen, if you're saying, listen, somebody should go in front of 11 million people and just ruthlessly make fun of a conspiracy theorist
It's
until they have a mental breakdown, I'm all for it, baby. Yes.
no, it's like it's a
Go
little bit. It's a
verbally.
little bit of both. It's a little bit of both. It's like, hey, I'm gonna debunk these points. Now, what about you? Now, what about you? And kind of harass them and like get on their
Yes.
like case a little bit and like kind of like push them up against the wall. And suddenly they're not. I'm not saying a clean because like any of these like clean sort of like, hey, we're just here to debate ideas. That's not happening with a conspiracy theorist. Okay, that goes out the wall. That goes out the window. Okay, because they are not dealing with reality. They are not
Right.
dealing with any sort of reality. Any sort of debate that you're going to have is 100% an optic. It's not about facts.
So
It's
then,
about optics.
so then, yes, then we may be in complete agreement. If you're
Okay.
saying that you need to do to Jesse Lee Peterson or to conspiracy theorists like what David Pakman does to Jesse Lee Peterson, yes. Or what
Okay.
Destiny did to Jesse Lee Peterson, yes.
Totally.
Or Dylan Burke, but they weren't debating. They were literally just making fun of the guy to his face.
Well, we're being pedantic here, I think.
Yeah.
Because I will call that a form of debate.
No, I got the
impression
what you wanted was some guy to go, Mr. Conspiracy Theorist, I'm going to assume that you're going to engage in good faith. So here are facts. No, listen, if you want somebody like Jon Stewart or again, like some sort of like rhetorically effective, aggressive personality.
No, that's what I'm saying. Okay. Then that's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. I'm saying like a Jon Stewart type would be amazing.
Yeah.
Like you got to come equipped with the facts because it can't just be making fun of the guy. It needs to be like laced. It needs to be laced with the facts, right? The insults have to be laced with facts.
I would argue it's not even insults because I don't think Pakman ever insulted you. He made fun of him. He was just like he was mocking him, and like I love that. Yes,
and that's we have. I agree.
I think you're with me then. I think at the end of the day, I'm not with you. You're with me. You agree that conspiracy theorists should be publicly mocked and made fun of and belittled.
Yes. But I think you have to get them in the arena to have them there.
Oh, I agree.
And like be in
Okay.
And it's heavily tilted in one person's side, in one side's favor. When you go on a Joe Rogan podcast, obviously, okay, you have Joe Rogan as the moderator, who will not be fair, and you have JF or RFK, who is.
I keep doing that too. I keep thinking JFK.
I know.
Damn it.
I don't know. Yeah. I don't know.
And then let's
RFK
see.
Jr., right? Yeah, of course.
Drumwild said that makes JLP not worthy of debate. Agreed, he's not. You don't debate JLP.
I think we're being pedantic here.
No, I think you know what I think. I think at the end of the day, the pedantry is you don't like the fact that ultimately you agree with me and that conspiracy theorists are just rhetorical punching bags. For those of us who are saying
we need to have a new word for debate, but it is only it is more of an optic thing than a fact-based one, and something that the optics include mockery. Like I was in speech and debate, and that is what I did. Right.
You're very good at it. By the way, again, guys, check him out on he's been on Wick a couple of times. I still think my favorite one. What was that one that was you?
One?
Was you and Falsers?
Yeah, it was the Vosh one where we were debating whether or not he was a
stochastic terrorist.
Yeah.
You guys were so good in that one.
I love that debate mostly because here is what it comes down to. I was arguing with Katie, who was a little bit of like that kind of conspiracy theorist where nothing was changing her mind. She was absolutely like set in her ways, and she was just using ridiculous arguments to
listen.
What it was.
I'll be
and
honest
it turned into a little bit of like, hey, here's what we've got on the stats we got the facts on our sides, but we're also going to a little bit make fun of you for being a complete.
Hey, all I'm gonna say is you be nice to Katie. I love Katie's bullying personality. She's like, I mean, she's just pitbull, man. She just
had fun.
Yeah.
So, and she 100% started that. Like she jumped in and she was like, "Hey, I'm willing for you."
100%. Like it's all just verbal rough play. Like you can't have a civil conversation. She loved. I think it's funny. She does. She loves it.
I'm not. Well, I am dissing Katie, but I'm only dissing out of love.
Well, good, because we have a guest here. Everybody, here's Katie. So Bronx LT says he might be a Bernie guy, but he doesn't think of himself as Democratic or socialist like Bernie does. Yeah, no. You're talking about
Joe
Rogan. Yeah. And honestly, I think this is a funny thing. Like, unless you just like Bernie's nature, which is possible because he has a curmudgeonly charm to him. I think Joe Rogan, this is what I mean, where he's not a deeply serious political thinker, and I think he admits to it, because what I expect he would say is, I like Bernie Sanders because I like the things Bernie Sanders advocates for.
I think he's a populist through and through.
Right.
He's really just like, I'm not I mean, I've seen a fair amount of Joe. I don't watch him regularly.
He does.
But
Stacks does all the time. You
I'm
said
a
that that's
huge
your
fan.
favorite. You go to bed listening to it. You wake up listening to it. Like,
Yeah. Is it
yeah.
is he dead? Doesn't he only do it once a week? Or no,
Yeah,
I
but
feel like
he's
it's
got a
more than that.
backlog. He's done it for 10 years. You say you go
Yeah,
back,
true.
you start from the beginning, like
True,
every
true, true,
couple of
true.
years.
But I think largely his opinions are like, I'm a libertarian at my base. Like, I 100% believe in. I think he's very
Somebody clip
socially
that. That's
left.
Stacks saying that he's a libertarian at his
Oh,
base.
Joe
Yeah.
Rogan is a
Yeah.
libertarian at his base. I think he believes in social rights that like pretty far to the left. Not on trans issues, but I think he was way. I think he was very much in favor of like gay
See,
issues.
wait a minute. See,
And
this is what I mean. Hang on, sidebar. My
yeah, what?
understanding, Stacks, unless things have changed, but I just don't follow. I lost interest in Joe Rogan shortly after his last David Pakman interview, which I think was during COVID, or maybe his Bernie interview, because of some of his like vaccine era takes. And I think it was also, I was listening to him on YouTube, and believe it or not, I'm so boomer. I do not have a Spotify account. I do not have a Spotify
Really?
account. Yeah, I do not.
Wait,
I just
where
never
do you
did.
listen to music?
Literally. So I have YouTube
Don't.
Premium. I have YouTube
Oh,
Premium. Number
oh.
one. Number two, because I can't stand, I advertisements and commercials just like drive me nuts. So I got Premium for that benefit. Number two,
Okay. Spotify has that too. You can pay for Spotify instead.
yeah, but I also watch YouTube videos. Like it's better because I don't just use YouTube for music. Number one, like it
This
just has
hurts
greater
me.
utility. Number one. Number
Okay, go
two,
ahead.
if I listen to music,
Uh-huh.
I use my
One, you
iTunes.
have terrible taste.
I use it. So, I'm
You said
sorry.
like
Say that
Journey.
again. Say that again to the bands which
You like
outsell.
exclusively listen to bands that
Listen,
existed 40
listen,
years ago.
listen. Tell that again to the bands that have outsold every band or artist you like ever, and or
That's
better
not true at
singers, or
all.
better singers and better musicians by far. Yeah, please tell me.
No,
Tell me.
you're like I'm just gonna turn a blind eye on
I'm
the
just listen.
entirety of music
Let's
for the
talk
last
about this
40
for a minute.
years.
Okay, Steve Perry of Journey had
Yeah.
like a 5-octave range, could
Okay.
outsing any of the singers that you like. Number one. Number two,
First
Neil
off, that's
Schon.
not why I listen to music at all.
Well, listen, I'm just first. This is a multi-pronged argument. I'm first demonstrating that the people I like are better than the people you like. Just kidding.
Okay.
But then
Okay.
listen. At the end of the day, music is subjective, man. Okay, I listen
Yeah.
to I listen to Journey and Def Leppard and Matchbox 20 and Goo Goo Dolls, but I also listen to
Okay.
Taylor Swift and The Weeknd, and like I'm all over the place.
I didn't know that you listen to more recent music. I feel like every time I talk to you, you're only talking about 80s bands. I guess now that you think about it, like Goo Goo Dolls, you do talk about them quite a bit. They're
That's right.
90s.
How many times have I
But
serenaded you
like,
with Iris? And I'd give up forever to
it's a
touch
beautiful
you.
song. It's a
Wait,
beautiful
what?
song.
It is, isn't it? Did you ever watch City of
I love Goo Goo Dolls.
You do?
They were one of my favorite like okay, we can't get too distracted. Someone mentioned oh, here we go. Like fair, but yeah, Goo Goo Dolls was
What about
they were
Matchbox?
one of my favorite. Yeah, Matchbox 20 and Goo Goo Dolls. Those were like
Yeah.
that era of music was like the first type of
Foo
music I fell in love with.
Fighters. Have you
Not as
like
much, but like
live?
yeah.
Do you like live? You know, lightning crashes.
I don't know
Oh,
what that is.
I feel it coming back
All right.
again like a rolling thunder chasing. You know that song.
I don't know that song.
Are you serious?
It's called Live?
Live. Lightning Crashes by Live.
I don't think so.
What about Stone Temple Pilots?
I kind of know them. I could probably name
Okay.
2 songs.
I don't ever want to hear you disdain my music taste ever again. Although you guys should know, and I'm going to plug this every time we do this.
Uh-huh.
Stacks has a really, I don't know what, seriously, I don't know why you don't put that thing out,
What?
the album you did, because it is really, really good.
Have you really listened to the
I
full
swear to
thing?
God, I listened to the whole
Really?
thing. I promise you. I promise you.
That's amazing.
That's the kind of, listen, that's what I mean. Like when people are like, oh my God, Josiah, you're so mean to Stacks. So like, actually, I'm really supportive of the guy. I just like to verbally.
I cannot believe you've listened to
Yeah.
my album.
I know. Listen.
I think like you're one of 30 people on the planet who have.
I'm just saying. So yeah, just throwing that out there. But anyway, a couple of things. Gunsmoke says Avi would be phenomenal. So he agrees with you. Alex O'Brien says, loved Steve Perry. Of course you do. Well said, Alex. We're just going to leave this comment here because and right under Stacks too. It's really important. And then Bronx LT says, here we go. So now I guess Is there anything else you want to say before we go to the Titanic?
No, I feel like we came to a pretty conclusive
We
ending.
did.
Yeah.
We did. So let's talk about the Titanic.
Sure. There are only two correct takes. 100. Yeah, nice. Here are only. So basically, what happened? I'm sure everyone is aware. Oh wait, here. Let's not get into that right yet. Um, so basically, what happened is there was a submersible that was, because it was in international waters, it was like highly deregulated, and like they were not using the correct materials. There's a tons of investigations where like there were whistleblowers on the company, and then they got like fired, and because like it was a little vague on what regulations they have to follow, they constantly were like cutting corners. And 5 people went into the submersible. We know now that the entire thing had imploded, that essentially there was a crack in the material that they were using, and like the immense amount of pressure they I do believe that it imploded at such a rate that it was hotter than the surface of the sun for a moment. Like it is that the amount of pressure at those depths are almost impossible, are unfathomable. Excuse the pun, because of fathom in ocean.
This guy. Nothing makes Stax happier than the tragic loss of life of 5 people.
No, wait,
2
hold on.
miles below. No, it's okay.
Because that's
Keep
what I want
laughing,
to talk
buddy.
about.
Yeah.
No, because that's what I want to talk about. I want to talk about two things. One, here's a correct take. We need to talk more about how silly anarcho-capitalists are, or libertarians who don't believe in regulation, because turns out regulation saves lives. Okay.
Wait, listen, you don't believe? Listen, man, you take government regulation out. Listen, a couple more people just like drop like rocks to the bottom of the ocean.
But look here.
No, listen,
Let me
companies
play
will
devil's
take
advocate
it.
for a little bit.
Companies will take it on their own initiative, Stacks, as they always have not done
Yes.
ever, and they will do the right thing. Like you remember that time?
Look, did they kill 5 people? Yes, but now their Yelp reviews have decreased in value.
100%.
So the next time that someone goes to Ocean Gate, they know, oh, they murder people.
Like, do you remember when companies chose on their own volition to stop hiring children laborers, or to give their workers magnanimously of their own volition weekends off and stuff like that?
Yeah.
100%.
100%. Yes, 100% agree. Two of the most frightening things is the immense pressure of the depths of the ocean, the vacuum of space. It is scary to think about. Here is where
quick. We got to address some of these comments real quick.
Yeah.
You asked a question of Gunsmoke earlier, and he clarified. A media-trained, intelligent debater who debates conspiracy theories is how he defines a conspiracy
100%
theorist.
agree with this.
Like RFK Jr., Ryan Dawson are different than your weird uncle. Although, spoiler alert, Ryan Dawson is his weird uncle. Come on out, Ryan. I'm just kidding. And then you have Gunsmoke, but yeah, good points on both sides. There's a third comment from Gunsmoke that said, but Josiah had the vastly superior points, and I love him, and he is so handsome. That's Gunsmoke said that.
So weird that you aren't able to pull that.
It's a glitch in the system. But thank you, Gunsmoke. I completely agree. Subri Keller said 2 of the most frightening things is the immense pressure of the depths of the ocean and the vacuum of space. Yeah, it's almost like like so much of this, I feel like, not to make light of it, but would be the premise to a terrifying horror film. I'm sure like there's one out there, because like I think it's like thalassophobia or something like that. The fear of the depths of space.
Yep.
And I have submechanophobia, like a fear of submerged man-made objects. I'm not even kidding. I cannot watch the Titanic. I used to be obsessed with shipwrecks, but I can't watch the Titanic. If I have my Apple Watch on, my heart rate goes through the roof. Watching the Titanic. It's terrifying.
Wait, watching the Titanic like through like a little submersible camera is what you're saying?
No, and so okay, I try to test myself on this because it's the most useless phobia to have.
Sure.
And I developed it over time because I used to have books, illustrated books about shipwrecks and things like that, the Titanic, the Lusitania, all the shipwrecks. And over time, they just started to freak me out. I remember I remember the first cruise I ever went on. My ex-girlfriend wanted to scuba dive to a shipwreck that was part of the cruise. And I couldn't do it. I'm like, hey, good luck to you. I'm going to be up here on I couldn't, because I thought if I see that thing underwater, just like a creepy, rusted, whatever it is, I'll probably just have an aneurysm and have a
panic attack underwater.
Dude, it's terrifying. Yeah. So
yeah,
these people paid $250,000.
Yeah,
Good.
yeah. So, I
Sorry, go
guess
ahead.
I this has been covered by quite a few amount of people. My little thing that I'm gonna say, and maybe this only exists on TikTok, okay, is the sheer, and I'm gonna just pull the big old liberal that I constantly am, or I'm gonna criticize a little bit of the far left. People taking glee in these 5 people dying are psychos. Okay, not to call anyone specifically out, but like, oh my gosh, the amount of times where I heard just like, haha, they deserve to die. Fucking Ocean is class ally. Like, thank God. I don't know. It's so it's shut the fuck up.
I'm like, what's this people? I've seen some truly. Well, I'll contribute to this in a minute, but
Yeah,
I've not seen the ocean's a class ally. Like, what do they have? Like a Pacific and the Atlantic with like a hammer
yeah.
and sickle over it or
Basically,
something? Okay, all
basically, or
right.
like the orcas that are like have little like communist. Yeah.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Anyway,
Go ahead. Keep going.
look, look, the memes are a little bit funny, but also taking glee in 5 people dying is probably not that great. And I did push back on this on TikTok because that is like the main place where I'm fairly large, and that's the place where I've seen it the
You should
most.
all follow Staxiums on
Thank
TikTok right
you. And
now.
like my last, so I made a video about it where I was like, you guys are freaking. I didn't say psychos, but I was like, hey, here's why this is unhelpful. Here's why you guys need to chill a little bit. Here's why we should have a little bit of empathy towards people. And here's why, like, this sort of mentality is why rehabilitative justice continues to elude us, where this is how we treat the villains in our society, with just glee and capital punishment. And it does irk me just a little bit. And this news article here, if you want to pull it now,
Oh, now I can
Josiah.
do it. Now
Yeah,
you'll
now
let
you can
me.
do it. Well,
Okay,
yeah,
thank you.
you're in charge, but I'm the one um
The
taking care of
commentary.
the. Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
exactly. I'm glad you're finally doing the heavy lifting here. You were always just the eye candy, and now you're actually contributing something thoughtful.
It's
Yeah,
it's
but then
hard.
then I try to share the article, and then you yell at me for sharing the article. That's what I'm saying. I can't win with you. There's nothing I can ever
Well, you can
do.
win right now by doing it.
Okay, sorry.
Hey, good work, buddy.
Thank you.
Uh, yeah. So there was a 19-year-old Titan passenger, and he said that he was terrified of going onto this thing, and he didn't trust it because you have to sign a bunch of like things. And he
Waivers.
said that he only wanted to go because it was Father's Day. And I don't know how you look at this story and go, yeah, fuck that guy. Fuck those people. Who gives a shit, dude? They're just billionaires. Like, we should be able to extend. I'm not even saying cry about these people. I'm just saying don't take glee in their death.
So
Okay.
can we read this real quick? So Asma Dawood, the older sister of Pakistani businessman Shahzada
Shahzada.
Dawood, told
Yeah.
NBC News that her nephew Suleiman informed a relative that he wasn't really very up for it, and he felt terrified about the trip to explore the wreckage of the Titanic.
But it fell over Father's Day weekend. Yeah,
But the
right there.
19-year-old ended up going aboard the Ocean Gate's 22-foot submersible because the trip fell over Father's Day weekend, and he was eager to please his dad, who was passionate about the lore of the Titanic.
I don't know how you look at this and laugh. I don't get it. And I want to criticize. I want to criticize the look. I'll criticize the right more. We've spent an hour and 25 minutes making fun of them. But like, oh my
I'll give you
god, I'm going to
5
spend the
minutes.
last 5 minutes making like. Apparently Schadenfreude is the only way that we can exist. So I have to respond with shame because those are the only two emotions apparently that motivate people anymore. But like, oh my god, it's a little frightening how people have responded. Yeah, I get a little bit of like the a little bit of the jokes, especially like when we weren't sure what exactly had happened, that it was just like missing. But now that we know that they died, like, and we're making fun of these people and we have more of their like names and stories, and you can't just extend the empathy to not make fun. I'm not saying you have to cry over every single death. I get it. People are dying constantly, all of the time. You can't cry about everyone all the time. But I'm just saying, like, taking glee in people's deaths. That is, I want to believe that we can be better as a human race. And all I'm saying is I'm grateful that these people seem to only exist in social media.
S-
Yeah, go
Yeah.
ahead.
So this is going to be my contribution to it. So, okay. Couple.
I do agree with this take, by the way. The drum wild. I'm gonna go real quick because
ahead.
this is a comment. I do have a leak that Stockton Rush is gone because he can never do this to others again. Regulations are not put in place to block innovation or profits. Every regulation was paid for in blood. I do agree that this person had almost almost like it's almost like not even indirectly what happened. He kind of killed 4 people and then killed himself. So
Yeah.
the CEO of the company was on the ship and died. And like it is pretty fair to say, hey, he cut so many corners. He was like the person who is in charge of all of these issues was on board. I feel like I'm not even like even mocking that person and saying, haha, I'm glad you die. Like, and I not to be that lib, but that just feels so callous. And I'm saying, hey, we can be grateful that those person's regulations aren't here on this planet anymore. But like, I don't know. I feel like it's so callous and so gross. I don't know. I don't know. How do you feel?
So we'll read this. There are actually several comments I want to read to
Yeah.
give them their due. So Super Keller says that CEO was basically a workplace shooter. He caused these deaths with his pride instead of a gun.
Yeah.
So let me say this. I've got several things to say, and I didn't
Uh-huh.
think I was going to comment on this because, once again, I try to keep things now. The implication is that this doesn't matter and you're silly for talking about it, but that's not what I'm trying to get at. Here's what I'm saying.
Sure.
This is a relatively niche issue. The
Sure.
Schadenfreude demonstrated by perennially online leftists. There's nobody in the Democratic Party. President Biden is nobody who is
Yes,
relevant.
I do
Nobody
agree.
who is relevant is doing this. That has to be said. And if they are, point them out to me. Then it becomes truly worthy of opprobrium. Excuse me.
Sure.
So what we're talking about is a number of very vitriolic people on Twitter who we don't know, who have no power, and in some cases, they have a lot of followers. It's true, but this is
Well, and in some cases, just to be the most fair, I found a video that was basically like, "Fuck these guys, and I'm glad they're dead." Ha 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 ha, and it got 400,000 likes on
okay.
TikTok, and like that is a substantial amount of people. I agree, it's not anyone in.
Yeah,
I agree, though, that these aren't people in high status. It's
yes,
just a large amount of people that is worrisome.
yeah. So okay, so again, relatively to me
Sure.
unimportant. However,
Uh-huh.
if we're not talking about this as an isolated event and more just like this is kind of a lens by which we can examine a broader notion of Schadenfreude and spite
Yeah.
and how it can interact with perceptions of class warfare and whatever, then that is certainly worthy of discussion.
Mhm.
So I'll say this. I have seen people on my timeline, at least one account in particular that I won't name that I follow, who has demonstrated quite a bit of the Schadenfreude,
Yeah.
and it is disgusting. So I'll also say this: I love dark humor, jokes about tragedies. I engage with them and enjoy them because I think that's just a universal language and a coping mechanism to make light out of the absurdity of certain things. My mother passed away. I watched her pass away. It was the most tragic experience of my adult life by far. And I've made jokes about my mother's passing, not because I don't care. Obviously, I loved my mother. I miss my mother. And again, it was a tragic experience, but that's a coping mechanism for me. And there's no
Mhm.
sincerity behind it. So, dark humor and memes, I don't have a problem with that.
Well, I think there is a sincerity behind it. You know what I'm saying? Like, I don't think you actually meet. What I'm saying is like, I don't think there's sincerity in the vitriol, but I think that like that those jokes have sincerity in them, where it's like these jokes are because I care about my mother, if
Sure.
that makes sense.
Sure. Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
and maybe
So,
that's being too pedantic, but like, I think that that's worth saying that like there's a difference between like mocking sort of humor and like a humor that sort of like unites our experiences, if that makes sense.
I don't see them as mutually exclusive because if you heard some of the jokes I've said, at least written down, they read mocking, they read as making light of it.
Sure.
So to me, again, it's not the jokes or the memes. I don't have a problem with that.
Sure.
My issue is when they're not jokes or memes and the interlocutor in question makes it abundantly clear that they're being quite so if a friend of mine made a joke, a genuine joke about the passing of my mother, I've had friends
Right.
do that, and if it's a funny joke, I'll laugh. But if they ever like expressed sincerity, like, or I could just tell like, oh, that wasn't you trying to make me laugh. That was for whatever reason you're delighted about this thing.
Yeah.
Ooh, we'd have a problem, right? But
For
that's the
sure.
difference.
For
So
sure.
when I see people, this account in particular, with respect to the story, they've made it very clear that they're cool with how this ended, including the death of the 19-year-old in question,
Yeah.
because and I'm paraphrasing here, but from their perspective, well, he was going to become
Yeah.
the sort of privileged billionaire that would exploit the proletariat, whatever. So that's really weird. I agree. It's psychotic. It doesn't do anybody any favors. And as somebody who thinks, and I've been very transparent about this, I think that negative emotions can and should be weaponized by the left because the right has done wonders with it. And I think we can put it to productive use. So bullying people is a great example. I think prominent Republican leaders can and should be bullied. I
Mhm.
absolutely in every way possible because they themselves are bullies and it's helped them politically. So we should
Sure.
try it because at least the things we're advocating for are better than the things that they're advocating for. This is one of those things that I think has absolutely no utility whatsoever. Now,
Because I think that there's a huge difference between saying, "Hey, you're a public speaker, you should be sued to hell and then moved out of public life," and
right,
saying you should be shot in the face.
right.
There's just a huge gap between those two statements, and I will and that's why I'm like a little bit conflicted on the Stockton Rush thing because for me, I think my preferred thing is that the submersible was found. Stockton Rush was completely banned from like ever constructing any sort of machinery ever and sued to fuck. And then the company going underwater and all of these people
Did you
being
make that pun on
compensated, and
purpose?
then the billionaires. Yeah, I didn't actually, but the billionaires being taxed uh, uh, immeasurably. Like I that is my preferred outcome. I don't want maybe I start looking around and I start realizing how many people are unironically saying "eat the rich," and I was like, "Whoa!" I just thought it was a metaphor for like
Yeah.
taxing them.
So that's the thing. Like that's my beef is. So I don't know enough about the Stockton Rush guy. If he's the CEO and he knowingly took shortcuts in
Yeah,
regulations that
and he fired
ultimately
people who were
contributed to
like,
this,
yeah,
then if that's the case, then I don't have much. I don't know if I would spend time, celebrating his death or anything, but he would be, if he makes it on the list of people I think about, he's literally the very last in this
yeah,
situation.
for
So
sure,
I don't mind people like it when they offer condolences, if they say four of the five that they are or whatever. No, and
yeah,
I don't honestly, Stacks, I don't think you should care either because I
yeah.
think there's, not to make it about Star Wars, but what happens at the end of Return of the Jedi when the Emperor is killed? People celebrate, and you'd be cool with that. You would be, oh, Palpatine was just a person, he deserves the great. I think we all have a dividing line where a person is so
I do agree with
repulsive
that.
that
Sure,
that the world is better off without them, and it's okay to celebrate that fact. We can do in real life Hitler, Bin Laden, whoever it is. Now, maybe this guy didn't go far enough to like
sure.
cross that threshold for you, but I think you should make
That's a
it
fair
very
point.
clear
That's a
that,
fair
yeah,
point. That's
yeah,
a fair point. That like, and I do think a big thing is that like nothing is fundamentally changed. Like that those $1 billion that they had, those aren't going to public use now that they've died. It's just going to the closest relatives, whoever's on the will, and that could
right.
be a bunch of different people. This doesn't solve any issues. And like with Palpatine or with Hitler or something, the war ended. Millions of people.
No, because Palpatine was resurrected
Oh my
in the
god.
greatest
Okay.
of the Star
Well,
Wars
let's
films.
go with the Hitler analogy. Okay.
Hitler was
Clip
resurrected, and
it. Clip
Hitler
it.
was resurrected, and he's currently going by Donald Trump. No, I'm just kidding. Um,
Oh, jeez.
yeah, yeah, I
Okay.
know, I know. As much as you love Donald Trump, I know that that's probably very offensive to you.
I mean, Hitler did kill my family. Not to like pull that card, but I'm gonna draw just a little bit of a line between those two.
That's fair. But you know
Uh,
what? Hey, listen,
yeah,
we have ample reason to be afraid of a second Trump administration.
of course.
There's no telling who he might get killed if he
Okay.
wins the presidency. Okay?
Shh. Okay.
Just saying. Just
Yeah.
saying. Be
Okay.
sensitive here, okay? Think about the potential families that might be impacted by a second Trump presidency. I know you don't care about that,
Oh my
but
gosh. I feel so deeply uncomfortable right now.
But anyway,
I don't know how to engage with this at all.
exactly,
But
especially
but what I'll
especially
say
with your
is like,
Trump support.
I think it's fair to cheer over Hitler's death for sure, of course.
Yeah.
Like because when he died, an entire empire fractured that was causing untold amounts of harm immediately after his death. Maybe not immediate. I don't know exactly when the war ended after he died. But
It was
pretty
already
damn close.
fracturing, and the war was inevitably lost for the Germans anyway. But so
True, but
the bottom line
that
is
was
this:
that was the divisive deciding factor.
decisive. The dividing decisive. Yeah, not
That was
to
the
be
decisive.
pedantic. Not to be pedantic.
Okay.
Okay. But for real though, so like I'll just say, obviously there's a line, right, where even
Yeah.
you think it's acceptable to celebrate the demise of a particular person, even if this one in question doesn't reach that threshold. To me, it's all about where you draw the line. I get it.
Yeah, I do agree. But even there is even some like Nazi, like I don't know if you've ever heard the story about the two Soviet soldiers who were like torture the Nazi soldier after the war is done by having him play, and whenever he stops, they shoot him. Like so he knows that, and he plays until he's exhausted and like just dies out of exhaustion. And they kill the body. Like it's so graphic, and I'm like, whoa! Like my family died because of the Nazis. There is a reason I'm American and not Polish, and it's because we were driven out because of those people. But I think that there is a point where I have to say, okay, that is too extreme. We can just say, hey, I don't want them around without engaging in actual torture.
Well, that would also be a case of vengeance and an act of just spite, even if you think it's okay. Like you said after the war is over, right? So there's like that person's no longer a direct threat or considerably less of a direct threat. So I understand that, but my point is, like, I agree with you that a lot of this is really weird and extremely unsettling. But something else I want to point out is this to me should almost, I wonder if this should be a bigger part of the story, which is let me share my screen here. What do you think about this? That migrant boat off Greece that happened in parallel.
100%. Well,
a lot of people are pointing out that it seems like there's quite a bit of time and attention and
totally agree to this.
Yeah.
Well, I kind of agree with this. I think that sometimes people have criticized institutions for not and as far as I could see with that migrant ship, there was the Coast Guard who got involved. There were like tons of people who were willing to save them. But when it comes to media attention, absolutely. Or like public attention, media or public attention. Absolutely.
Too hot
Maybe
for the
I'm
boards.
complicit
Hang
in
on,
that.
real quick. I'm sorry. Too hot for the boards. What's that mean?
I don't know.
Bye, Drum. I don't know what that means, but clarify.
Bye.
I've never heard that expression before.
I'll look it up.
Yeah.
Too hot for the boards. It doesn't mean anything because nothing came up.
You listen here. Drum knows what he's talking about, or she.
Okay.
He knows. Anyway, but you were saying about the institutions.
Well, as far as I'm aware, like a ton of governments were like, hey, we need to save these people. But when it comes to media and public perception, absolutely, we talked about the submarine way more than these migrants. And it is largely because of their income and their status. And I agree. And maybe I am complicit in that by sharing.
No, you definitely are. And I am too, by talking about it. Yes.
That's hard to grapple with. And I should grapple with that. That the fact that I didn't bring it up. And I'm glad you did. Because that is something that we all need to be talking about. And I'm not even that familiar with the story.
No, nor am I. And so this is part of the reason why I caught myself the other night just, I don't know, I guess just to piss myself off or whatever, or just to like almost like, how like if like when you pull a tooth and there's like the hole that's left behind and you just like reflexively tongue it and it's like, why are you doing that? It hurts. I almost wonder if I did that a bit because there was absolutely no utility in this. It's a relatively small issue in the grand scheme of things going on in the world. But I looked for like 5 minutes on Twitter. I think I did a Twitter search of 19-year-old Titanic just to see how people were addressing this. And some of the things I read were just like, ugh. And, but I was like, you know what? Yeah, that's really bad. And I think indefensible, again, especially when it comes to whatever Schadenfreude about this kid or even indifference. Like, let's say you're not actively gleeful at his death, that you should I don't think you should be indifferent to it either. But it's such a, I did not want to contribute to, this is what I mean. Cause it's like, it's so, to
I
me,
agree.
it's only relevant as part of a broader and harmful tendency of people to have unmitigated schadenfreude. I think negative emotions can and should be weaponized as part of a political
Yeah.
movement. I think they can and are politically efficacious. Certainly they are for the right. So I don't see why the left can't and shouldn't engage in it as well. Targeted, specific acts of bullying and contempt. This idea that we've got to go, above all, Marquis of Queensberry rules and always like the Jesus Christ ethic of turn the other cheek. No, I think that there's clearly anger on the left
Yeah.
that can and should be harnessed for a successful socio-political movement. But this is just, it's weird. It's really
Yeah.
weird and I
I
think indefensible.
I agree with. So I want to say thank you for pointing out the fact that this is very one sided to me. I think I saw, like, I didn't really comment on the submarine thing. I was just I think I made one video that was like, hey, this is why regulations are important. And I was like, we should save fewer people's lives. This should be used as an example to show why regulations absolutely don't do it. And I was just like kind of doing that, like, hey, let's stop fewer lives. And then I didn't mention it. And then I saw so many people making light of it, where it's like, I need to speak on this because I feel like that's my audience.
Sure.
Is that like we have a fairly far left, I assume, audience who is maybe engaging with this kind of thing, and I
Well,
find that so
my
toxic
audience
towards.
is your audience is all Jill Stein supporters, as we well know. But yeah, but
No, dude,
but
I lost followers for the second video that I posted, and I guess what I'm saying is I'm kind of torn between like, let me speak to my audience and what I think they can do, and also let me set an example for what media should be about, because those are not the same thing at all.
sure.
And I'm constantly like, I'm not sure which way I should lean, because the submarine story is absolutely like, hey, I'm just talking to my base. This isn't really important at all. Like, and that's that at the end of the day, you're making a really good point about the migrant story, how we're only talking about them because they're in the news story. Yes. And it's a weird tabloidy, weird but true story. The fact that a submersible disappeared underwater is way more interesting and captivating than, a migrant ship where some people died. Like, and that might just be a failure of how we interact. But I appreciate you saying, hey, let's also not ignore the fact that we are contributing to this sort of like conversation by engaging with it. And I think that that's a fair point, and maybe something that we should acknowledge. Maybe that's something that I'm going to think about and maybe tailor my subjects on what I speak about a
Yes,
little bit
and
differently.
that's, to me, that's also really interesting as well. It's not just the broader abstract notion of, again, to whatever extent the left experiences spite and schadenfreude and how, when, and where and why it should be deployed. And there's also, again, to me, triage. Like, I don't think that everything has to be perfectly finely calibrated, because as some critics of mine have pointed out, if you really only concerned yourself with the most maximally important topics, you would pretty much exclusively talk about like climate change or
Yeah,
artificial intelligence or things like that. So it's
for
like,
sure.
okay, fair enough. But the fact of the matter is, as much disgust as I felt like, this is really weird, especially involving the indifference or spite that was either person was unaffected by the fact that there was a 19-year-old reluctant participant in this, or they were still gleeful over it whatsoever. I don't like that. And I feel like any pushback towards it, there should be pushback from the left to the left. But I also don't think it should become a person's mission statement, because, again, if we're really talking about spite, we are talking about people who are on Twitter who are, almost exploiting the anonymity that they enjoy. This is not reflective, as far as I know, in terms of like mainstream political or public figures on the left. I think if you ask President Biden, or even people like who are progressive, like Bernie Sanders or AOC or Rashida Tlaib or anybody, Elizabeth Warren, they'd be like, yeah, I take absolutely no joy in this whatsoever. It's kind of
Sure.
weird if you do. And I think then the question becomes, why are people feeling this way? Is it because, the left is populated by congenital sociopaths or whatever, people are just born this way? Probably not. I think it also speaks to longstanding frustrations
Sure,
that
totally.
also should help motivate the left. Like, damn, if we don't start getting more W's, this sentiment and this resentment is only going to grow and get worse.
Sure,
This
but
is part of the problem. This
I
needs
also agree that I also want to say that it comes from a lot of misinformation as well, because there is this perception that billionaires will solve our problem. And here's this I like I'm all for taxing them. But here's a fun little statistic. If we confiscated all of every billionaire's wealth, do you know how long we can run the American government with
probably
that money? It's 8 months.
yeah, not even a
Like,
year.
yeah, it's not even a year.
The collective
It might
wealth,
be 9 months.
the collective wealth of billionaires in this country does not match a fiscal budget for
Yeah.
the United States.
And I think that, if we want to criticize the billionaires, that's fine. But we should also recognize that we have the tools right in front of our hands to get this shit done too. We don't even need their wealth. We have the entirety of the American government budget kind of at our hands collectively. We live in a democracy where we can pressure our senators to like, hey, if you're frustrated about homelessness, we don't even necessarily need billionaire taxes to do that. We can just vote for that shit. And like, we could get that done. And I guess I think that that's kind of where I get frustrated, where it does feel like a little bit of a lack of, it's almost like misplaced anger, where it's just thrown in a direction that's like only vaguely helpful.
Sure.
And I'm not saying taxing billionaires doesn't do anything. I'm very much in favor of it, but like pretending like that is just, that's the whole issue. Like, I don't know. I just feel frustrated by it, and I know that that's who my audience is, and I know we sort of lean into two different directions, where I'm kind of like, hey, I want to talk to the people who are listening and the ways in which that they can be helped, and you're like, hey, I get that, but if I want to be a media source, which I kind of am, and if I want to acknowledge that there's alternative media is like now the go-to place for news, I want to be that better place for where we get news and actually recognize what is like meaningful. And I think we both lean in those directions and recognize that it can't fully be one side, because like if you go to my page, I very rarely do news. I do like analysis, or like, hey, here's how we should be thinking about these issues. Here's how ways you can engage with
yours were
people
a
around
bunch
you.
of like feet pics and feet videos.
I know. Well, those do.
Oh, we're talking about TikTok still. Oh,
they do way. Yeah, exactly.
I gotcha.
Exactly.
Wrong.
I got banned way ages ago.
Well, no, I agree, but like, so a good piece of news that should make all of us happy, that I guarantee you nobody will. I shouldn't say nobody. People are talking about it.
I watched your video
about President Biden's union victory.
Absolutely.
So nobody will talk about that. And here's the thing: as awful
because
as
it's a victory, and that's the unfortunate news.
Yeah, well,
I think we're motivated by failures, and I don't know.
What if we spin it as a Republican failure? That would be, maybe that will like motivate people to watch it. But like, yeah, so I think as one of the commenters said, there's like a tabloid element there, but there's also, I'm telling you, man, like it's just the things that we choose to focus on. I think that we have a responsibility at times to try in our own small, perhaps even nihilistically meaningless ways to swim against the current and try to tell people to do it as well. Because, here we have a situation where we almost suffered a severe economic catastrophe in December because of a rail strike that threatened to unleash. And President Biden, at the end of the day, urged Congress to basically crush the attempts by workers to strike. And his calculus was understandable. Listen, as bad as that is, if we have an economic catastrophe before Christmas, many more people, A, will be hurt, B, be inconvenienced, and C, it's going to be really bad for me politically, and I need to win politically in order for more. Like, there's utilitarian logic there that would benefit. But a lot of people pitched it as Biden betraying the working class. And I also understand that.
Yeah,
and
I don't necessarily blame that.
Yeah, and I also thought that, okay, well, now that it's done, will we ever see this be revisited? And lo and behold, for 6 months, the Biden administration, President Biden, Bernie Sanders, worked quietly, continuing to pressure the rail industry. And lo and behold, one of the biggest unions in the country, the International Brotherhood of Electric Workers, their workers in the rail industry got 4 paid sick days, which is 4 paid sick days more than they had 2 weeks ago. That's extraordinary. You could say it's insufficient. There's still a long ways to go.
I wouldn't even
Absolutely.
disagree. Yeah.
But that's President Biden and the progressive elements of the Democratic Party delivering for the American people, for workers. And nobody's going to talk about it. It's not
Yeah.
sexy.
There's this amazing video that I rewatched. Honestly,
Enough
like
about me. What?
all right, a different video.
Okay,
I'll talk about
yes.
a different video.
All right, yeah, thank you. Yeah.
It's by Hank Green, and it's called. I think it's just called. I don't know a good title for this video, but it's like 4 minutes long. I encourage everyone to watch it. It's honestly, I think the greatest YouTube video I've ever seen in my life, and I
Okay,
rewatch
all
it
right.
constantly.
Enough. I can't believe he would say that. That's hurtful. I do the greatest videos he's ever seen. He's just, that's what I'm saying, the abuse that I get on his side. I'll let him back in a minute, but this is what I mean. Like, no respect whatsoever. He's actually never seen a video of mine ever. Okay. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Okay. I'll like your YouTube videos a little bit more. But basically, the whole point of the video was we need to see the good and the bad at the same time. Yeah. Because we have this tendency as humans to, if we look at the good, we get nothing done. And if we just look at the bad, we get nothing done because we despair, right? And if we only look at the good, there's only light. And he says, like, you know, he just sits and watches the ships roll past, and he says, like, my biggest mission is about climate change, but I also care about, like, I have these like little businesses where I like sell socks and I get cool socks to people. And like, I can relish in the fact that these ships are bringing such cool things to other people. And that's such like a benefit of human beings, but also this like destructive force that is quietly harming our planet. And I need to find a way to look at both things at the same time. And I think about that constantly because I know I do that. I know I focus so much on like, look at all Biden accomplishments. And I think I just do it because I'm so fucking tired of people saying that he's like, that like, his approval rate's at like 35% or something. I don't know if it's that low, but I feel like I saw a poll.
Where it was the last I saw it. It was in the mid 30s.
Like
aggregate.
And like that irritates me so much. And people come to me with like valid criticisms, and I'm like, fair. Like and like sometimes I get so caught up in the good that I like forget like, oh no, there are valid criticisms of him and his administration. And we need to be aware of that. We need to be cognizant of that. And I guess the only thing that I'm going to come back to is like, we need to find a way to look at the good and the bad at the same time.
Agreed. 100%. So I'll say this because we went over about 22 minutes. So we're going to go ahead and wrap it up. But that was a really good and spirited conversation. And Stacks, you also were here.
Nice.
So a couple of things. Let's see here. Bronx LT says it's weird. It's always been like this. That's why we love those tabloidy, weird but true stories. It keeps the New York Post in business. It's true. Subri Keller says we can't have two parties that are both vicious. We need a decency party. I wish we could, but we're ultimately going to have what is Democrat. It? What's that great? There's a great line in Dracula Untold where he's like, sometimes to beat a monster, you need a different kind of monster, something like I don't know. I agree that I can't remember the.
Well, that's why we don't have a decency party, right? That's why we have the Green Party, and we should all vote for.
See, this is what I mean.
And Jill Stein,
exactly.
In the 2016 election.
The head of
nothing bad will ever happen.
The head of the Jill Stein fan club. No, listen. In all seriousness, Super, I think that what I'm talking about is a targeted, a very targeted, very specific, very calculated use of there's so many negative emotions on the left. It's not just exclusive to the right. Like the right has been really good about weaponizing fear and hate and contempt and all the things like the dark side. And unfortunately, whether we like it or not, there are these things on the left as well. And actually, the left has some legitimate concerns to fear and hate certain things. And I think we have an obligation to try to harness that for politically efficacious outcomes. Like Democrats should be campaigning on how you should be afraid if Donald Trump wins a second presidency. This is a man who's talked about, appointing special counsels and a Justice Department against his enemies. He's explicitly said it. He wants to fire the federal bureaucracy, basically make the entire federal government at-will employees of the president. What could possibly go wrong there? We know about his cozy relationships and his fawning, effuse praise of authoritarians internationally. We've seen how he has enriched himself from the presidency because he hasn't divested himself of his business and all the foreign complications. So, like, we should absolutely aggressively try to motivate people, because the right is motivated through fear and they're very good at it. And maybe I'll even grant you this: it may be possible that doesn't work for the left. Some people have said that, well, that just won't work for us. Maybe. I would at least like us to try, for the love of God, especially given the stakes are so high. Can we please? Because there's clearly a lot of fear and anger on the left that is being undirected or not effectively directed. And I just think it's like an energy source that we could potentially harness for productive ends. That's why I don't think every time, maybe somebody like Joe Biden should, because he's supposed, he's the head of state and he's supposed to be a figurehead. But we need some Rottweilers in the Democratic Party. It's one of the reasons, like last week, Stacks and I were talking about Gavin Newsom, and I think he does it with a dignity and grace, but he's taking, an aggressive tone, an aggressive posture. He's hitting back. People like that. And I can only speak anecdotally, but from what I've seen on my Twitter feed and conversations I've had with people, myself included, I am starving for major players in the left and in the Democratic Party to basically go nose to nose with the hateful bigots like not Gavin Newsom, like Ron DeSantis and Greg Abbott and people like that. And not just say, listen, I'm going to be super polite to you. No, I want them to say, listen, you suck, and here's why. I'm going to tell you suck. And, my party is better than your party, and you're actually hurting your own damn constituents, and they need to see how much you suck, you loser. Like, yeah, we need that aggressive posture. That's what I want to see.
Sure. All right. We are way over.
Yeah, exactly.
But every time we're like, okay, we're gonna have an hour and a half.
We did really well the last two, but then you started to get on your Jill Stein, how much you love her, and how much you love billionaires and everything else.
So it's so interesting how my own voice sounds when repeated through yours.
It sounds much more like seductive and erotic.
Facts.
Yeah. Faxiums, not
That's why I gotta go.
Yeah. All right. Well, guys, listen, guys and gals and everybody, we appreciate the support. We appreciate the engagement. I will not be here next Saturday because I'll be out of town. So we won't be here next Saturday. Stacks will be here, but he does his own solo show on a different channel, if you know what I'm saying. It's all feet all the time.
Correct. It's generally I don't go live at all, but I still sit in front of the computer and pretend like I'm having a conversation with you because I miss you so much. So,
thanks, buddy. See, that's a good note to end on. That note of positivity. All right, everybody. Thanks for joining. We appreciate it.
Thanks, guys.